Welcome to the Sleep Sense Show. As always, brought to you by the Sleep Sense program, where podcast listeners can get a free customized sleep plan by going to www.sleepsense.net/listen.
Hi, this is Dana. Welcome to the show. Being a parent today can be a challenging experience. We're filled with endless interruptions, crazy to-do lists, and just a busyness of making it through each and every day. It can leave us feeling like we're in a little bit of an identity crisis, perhaps, or it's easy for us to lose track of what's really important and what matters most to us when we're so busy just making it through the day-to-day. My guest on the show is Alyssa Westring, who, along with her associate, Stuart Friedman, have recently released a book called Parents Who Lead, the leadership approach you need to parent with purpose, fuel your career, and create a richer life. I love this conversation because it focuses on what it means to be a good leader and why we should even be considering ourselves leaders of our family. I never really thought to think about it that way, but children are watching our every move. And that old saying that, do what I say, not what I do, isn't really the greatest approach, because children model what they see, and are we showing them what we really want them to be learning as they become adults themselves? So one of my favorite parts of our conversation is talking about creating family core values. You know, I think every corporation has their core values for the business. You can often see them on the wall when you walk into office buildings. But I never really thought or stopped to think about how important that might be to create among your family members. And I think what that does is it creates this common goal or this common ground of how we behave and what is important to us as we navigate the future together. And getting kids involved in that conversation about what's important to them, what values do they have or do they hold as an important part of being a human being. So I hope that you take some nuggets with you as you listen to our interview. It certainly helped me think about how I can be a better leader to my family as well. So enjoy this conversation. Hi everyone, and welcome to the show. Good morning, Alyssa. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, I'm always curious when I talk with authors. You know, I believe, especially nonfiction, that there is a calling or something that you see in a glaring light that needs to be addressed. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration for the book, Parents Who Lead.
My background is that I'm a professor, so I'm primarily doing writing for academic journals, writing up research in a really boring, non-conversational, non-personal way. And when the opportunity came up, it was really exciting to say, how can I take this research that I've been doing for almost 20 years and actually use it in a way that gets it into the hands of people who need it quickly, right? I've always been waiting, hoping if you do good research, somebody will pick it up and see its value, but to actually get to be the one who does the translation and tells the stories, my own personal stories as a working mom into the book, it's been really exciting. And that was really the driving force behind wanting to write it.
Well, that's great. And so, I think it's interesting. I love the title, and I feel like there'll be some listeners out there who don't always think about parenting as leading or being a leader. And I love that sort of challenge to sort of reframe our role in our children's life. So tell us, what, in your opinion, are the aspects of a good leader?
Well, in this sense, the good news is we know a lot about what the best leaders do. They know what's the most important to them. They create, inspire others to come along with them, and they are continually trying new ways of making things better. So the science is really clear on what good leadership looks like. And when we take that and apply it to parenting, it actually makes perfect sense, even though we're not necessarily trained to think that way. It's really about helping our children learn values, grow into the kinds of people that we hope for them to be, and, with new ways, helping them grow while also contributing to our own lives and finding purpose and meaning and satisfaction and joy in our own lives, not just as parents, but as people who may have careers, hobbies, interests, etc.
Right. I agree. I think, one thing to always consider is that if you're going to be a leader of your family or in your career, it's important that you have good leadership over yourself. I think that's a place you start in the book, and I think it's a great place to start in general.
Yeah, people, the idea of do as I say, not as I do is it's a trope in parenting that we know lots of people who go out and tell other people, especially their kids, how to behave and how to act. But, the work starts within us first and foremost. And I think, those of us who are parents, our shortcomings are sort of put into hyper focus by parenting. So you kind of have to do the work on yourself before you can really be ready to be a leader as a parent.
I agree. So in the book, you talk about the four-way view. Can you tell us more about what that is?
Absolutely. So the four-way view is really a way to get a sense of how you're spending your time and energy right now. So in order to grow and to change, you have to have a good sense of what your current situation looks like, what the present looks like. And we find that for most people, 4 domains or 4 buckets of life is a really helpful way to think about that. So we start with family, which means being a parent, but also a partner, thinking about our own parents or our extended family, includes the work domain or career domain, which is our jobs if we're working outside the home, but maybe even our career in terms of how we think about that over our life course. So if you're a stay-at-home parent, that doesn't mean that you don't have a career in your life at all. It could be volunteerism or something else. Your community, which is your connection to friends, neighbors, religious groups, any sort of organization, and self, your mind, body, and spirit. So when we ask people to take the 4-way view, we say, how much attention are you spending on each of the different parts of your life? How important are they to you? And how satisfied are you with them? And it just helps people get a sense of what's working and what's not. If you notice, I'm spending all this time at work, but it's giving me absolutely no happiness. So it's just a really good way to gain some self-awareness that you need in order to start making positive change.
Okay, and so you would look at where are you currently in these 4 domains, what's your satisfaction level, what's going on for you, and then once you've gathered that info or had a little bit of time to reflect, what would you say then is the next step?
So one thing that we include in the book and that some people are really excited about is asking their partner to do the exact same activity and to say, where are the different parts of your life and how are they going? If you don't have a partner, you could do that with anybody that you consider sort of integral to your role as a parent. But starting to look at within yourself where are the connections between the roles and within and across other people who are critical to your performance, how does your partner's work affect your home life? Or how does your, if you have an older child, how does their school or activities impact your time to take care of yourself? So starting to look for those connections, and what we find is that when people start to do that, it's opportunities to make things better.
Great.
It's really important to take some steps to do that because the obvious stuff you would have done already. If it was glaringly obvious about what change to make, you probably would have done it already. But when you start looking more deeply, then some exciting opportunities for change start to reveal themselves. And then you can start to come up with, oh, there's ways to make things better across multiple parts of life. So we really want to encourage people to find wins that don't require sacrifices. So how can I make things better in my personal life without making my family suffer or my work suffer, right? That's the ideal, rather than saying, okay, if I want to do better at one thing, then I guess the other parts of my life have to suffer. That's sort of the perspective that we take, is that there's this possibility to have what we call four-way wins.
Great. And so I think when I talk to parents and my community and my friends and family, I think one of the things that comes up for almost everybody is this idea of having too much, right, on our plates, like being too busy, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like there's no time. I hear that constantly. This busyness that has consumed almost every family's life. So talk to us a little bit about, I love the idea of reflecting and taking some time to sort of look at fulfillment in all areas of our life. But if people are sort of stuck in this hamster wheel of busyness, how do we even begin to kind of carve out some space in all of that?
Exactly. So I think I speak from personal experience when I say that I know what you mean, but also so many of the parents that we worked with when we were doing the book felt the same way. And one of the questions that kept coming up is, why am I doing all of this stuff? Do I really have to? And parents started to get really good at discerning what they feel like they have to do, what they're telling themselves they should do, which they may or may not have to do. They just have this story in their head of what they have to do. And then, what their expectations are for themselves and others, and really reality checking that to say, do my kids need to be in all these activities? Do I need to volunteer for every single group? What are the things that really matter to me and to my family? And what can I let go of? So in the book, we found that there's really 6 key ways that parents made changes for the better. And one of them was a type of experiment that we call letting go. They tried to drop some of their perfectionism and realize what they could let go of in their daily life that wouldn't create harm, right? It was just about how can you rethink these things so that if you stop maybe making perfect dinners every night that are, lovely and beautiful, right? If you drop that should, are you more satisfied, happier? Or maybe you do that and you find out, oh, I really actually enjoyed that. That's not one I want to let go of. And you start to get smart about realizing what you're able to let go of so that you do get off that hamster wheel a little bit.
That's great. That's good advice. Sort of making a list. Sometimes I find it's helpful is to write out, what exactly are all the things that I'm doing in a day, and just seeing that can give some perspective of, maybe I could cross a couple of things off here so I could free up a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to one of my mom friends about pandemic times, and she told me that she has this great sense of peace and calm right now because she's put so much less pressure on herself to be everything and do everything. And she said, I always had this idea that I wanted my daughters to have every opportunity. So I had them in all these different lessons and practices and rehearsals. And she said, this is the first time where I've given myself and my children some space to breathe. And for her, this time has really completely shifted how she thinks about all of those obligations that she puts on herself and on her family. And it sort of forced her off that hamster wheel. So maybe there's some positive to be learned in this challenging situation that we're in.
Oh, I absolutely agree. For us, it's really freed up, a little bit of space for connection on a very basic level, like just going out for bike rides as a family, which we have never done. It's kind of crazy when I think about it, but never have we done that. And that's something we're doing almost nightly now. So it's just like kind of getting back to the basics and looking at ways to be together, and there's so much comfort in nature. I think that when we are together as a family out in nature, it's just like two winds that we're having, and it feels really great.
And you're getting the exercise, which is good for your mental health and your emotional health. So it's really one of those four-way wins.
Right.
Example, because it's capturing so many of the different parts of your life at once, and theirs as well.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. So let's talk a little bit. I know there's a lot of moms listening to the show, and I know a lot of moms who need to go back to work or want to go back to work, or both of those things happen in the parenting experience. I know for myself, I didn't actually love being a stay-at-home mom. That wasn't something that I found as fulfilling as I thought I might. And so having a career has always been a really important aspect of my life and my happiness. But with that comes the guilt, right? The guilt that my job takes me away. I'm not traveling obviously now, but I do travel quite a bit for my job. And so what do you say, or what does the book talk about as far as I guess the spill off to parents who have to work or want to work, or is there any pros and cons to that situation for our kids?
Yeah. So, I think I take solace in the fact that there's really no research suggesting that kids have moms who work outside the home are any less developed, less compassionate, less supported than those who do not. So the first thing is, we can go back to the science when we're feeling guilty. But also, for me, and we found this in the book too, is really articulating our values and how work allows us to fulfill those values and show those values to our children. So it's not just I'm going off to work because I don't want to be at home, right? It's I'm going off to work because I value providing financial support for our family, or I value helping people, or I value making a difference, or I value being part of a team. And when you use that language, both to yourself and to your children, and you're showing them how you live your values. And if there's anything we want our children to do, it's to live theirs. So I think, this idea that we should give up everything that we care about and everything that makes us happy for our children, it's not necessarily setting the example that we hope it will. But for those who want to stay home and that aligns with their values, then it's great. Right. It's just for those of us who have different values or different priorities, we need to express that. And, that doesn't mean our kids will always agree with us that it's the right thing to do in the present or in the short term, but hopefully in the long term, we're showing them how to be people who stand up for what we care about.
Right. I love that. And I think if we, again, think of ourselves as a leader, right, of the family, if we were to look at a leader who is fulfilled and has meaning and purpose and is happy, right, that does make you a good leader. And I think I've always looked at it from the perspective of my kids see me going after my dreams, and they see me accomplishing things, and they see me having meaningful work. And I think that I'm leading by example, I think, is the way I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you make it explicit in conversations with them, it even makes it more real to them.
Right. Now, moving into sort of the children's perspective of the book, and I actually love the layout, how it's mainly about you, right? The parent. And then the second part of the book talks about bringing the kids into this and creating this this family where everybody's thriving in those four-way wins. And you talk about 4 things that children need. Can you touch a bit on what those 4 things are?
I'm going to hope that I can remember exactly what I said. But, you know, we start out with, these are just the basic things that kids need, right? They feel safe, especially right now. So they need to have a sense of, you know, I'm loved, I have the things that I need, and that's sort of the foundation. They need about morality and values. They need attention and affection.
Yes.
And then they need clear in the pandemic on the loss of brain power.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the 4th one? You just cut out right when you said it.
Sorry, clear expectations.
Yes. And that was one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah.
And so I guess one of the things that came up for me as I was reading the book, so I have 3 teenagers from the age of 14 to 17. And
wow.
Yeah, and so when I was reading this and thinking about it, you know, I love to have these types of conversations with my kids, although I do find it a little hard to open the door to the conversation, if that makes sense. Like I get a lot of, you know, if I were to ask my kids, what do you need? I would get a blank stare probably and an I don't know, which tends to be one of their very favorite things to say to me. So can you provide me with some advice? And I'm hoping the listeners will also find value in this, but help me with that conversation to peel away some of the layers to get to the heart of what my kids need.
Great. Yeah, then I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. So I the teenage years as a mom myself, but we certainly work with many parents with teenagers, and I can tell you what I do with my undergraduate students. That seems to be a really good way to start those conversations. And I ask them to say what their values are and how they're living them. So I found some website that has a list of like 500 different things that you could value, and I make them pick their top 10 and try to articulate those and say why they're important to them. And then what they need sort of emerges from the gaps between what they value and what they're doing on a daily basis. So are you getting a chance to express this value? Are you getting a chance to express that value? Why or why not? How could we fulfill that? How could we find creative ways to fulfill those gaps? So it's cool to help, again, see the gaps between the present and the ideal that can start conversations. Because sometimes we just don't, even as adults, don't necessarily know what we need, right? We might know, I don't feel excited about my day, or I feel lethargic, or I feel kind of lonely, or I don't feel like doing my work. But we don't necessarily know how to solve that or what to do about it until we start looking into what do I care about, what brings me joy, and where are the gaps. So, you know, that's the approach that I've used with my teenage-ish college students, and that we found that other parents do as well, did find that approach useful as well. Mm-hmm.
And so what age would you start that conversation with kids? I know there's a few examples in the book of talking to quite young kids as early as 6. So what would you do then to kind of make that conversation age appropriate for little ones?
Yeah. So, and I did this with my kids when they were younger than 6, and I'm trying to create a family motto, like, who are we as a family? What do we care about? And I used it in their language, and I kind of guided them through it. So we came up with the idea of we're a family that cares about kindness, fairness, and fun. And a 3-year-old kind of has a sense of, you can say, no, that's not kind, and they certainly know what feels fair or not fair, and they know about having fun. So talking to my children now about why they're being forced not to go to school or they can't go out without a mask, we can talk about fairness in a much more sophisticated way, or kindness in a more sophisticated way now that they're older. And then as they get a little older, they might be able to differentiate their own values from our family values. And, my kids really haven't done too much of that yet. So we're still, all on the same page, operating as, family from their perspective. They're not articulating, particularly unique. I actually am thinking I'll take it back because my son became a vegan. My 10-year-old became a vegan several months ago, all on his own, without any of us involved, really because of his own unique values. So, they'll start differentiating themselves from the family and expressing themselves as individuals and their unique values along the way as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. When I'm thinking back to working, in the teaching profession and even in our business currently, we sat down and gave a lot of thought to what are the core values of our business. But I never actually thought of creating core values for our family. So I really love that idea.
Yeah, we made a little flag and a little poem to go with it when they were little. They don't remember that, but I do. And other families that we work with spent time doing similar things. And then as tensions arise or as there's differences of opinion or important decisions that have to be made, you can kind of go back to that and say, how do our values tell us how we should approach this situation as a family, as opposed to, I'm your parent, here's what I want you to do.
Right. And so when you're having these conversations, I know you talk a little bit about it in the book, and maybe just the actual conversation helps kids sort of figure out the difference between what do I need and what do I want. So for a lot of parents, they might be thinking, if I sit down and ask my children what they need, what I'm going to hear is, I need a new iPhone, and I need, a new game system, or the difference between things that I want and what I actually need. How do you help a child sort of navigate the difference?
Right. So the way we do it and the way the best leaders do it is going back to those values again and again. And, even when they're going to be like, oh, Mom, I already heard that before. But how does their need or their perceived need align with or conflict with values that you share as a family? So, they might want or feel like they need to stay up all night playing on their iPad. But as a family, we value maintaining our health, which means that they need to get some sleep. Right. So it's acknowledging what they say that they want and need, but being able to have those values and sort of a shared vision of what you're trying to accomplish as a family as the yardstick for measuring whether those needs are legitimate or not.
That makes sense. That's great. So in Chapter 7, you talk about the concept of experiments to achieve family four-way wins. Can you share a little bit more with us about what that looks like?
Yeah. So we talked about taking the four-way view a little bit earlier. And the idea is that once you start to look at the present, you want to come up with ways to make things better across multiple parts of your life for yourself and for your family. So the way to do that is with experiments. And we very purposefully call them experiments because it helps people see them as something that you just try out to see what happens, right? So you're more like a scientist who's curious rather than you're trying to solve this work-life balance problem. And if you get it right, then everything will be magically perfect. And if you get it wrong, then you're, in big trouble. So we ask people to think about their life like scientists and kind of develop a hypothesis. If I did this, I think it would make my family life better, my personal life better, my community, my work, etc. And then you try it out for a set period of time and you measure, like a scientist would, what happens. You look at, is my family life better? You might measure that with, time that you have to give your kids times out that week, or number of times where you lose patience and yell. or, every day you rate your satisfaction or happiness on a scale of 1 to 10. And you look for these experiments that can make things better across multiple roles. And you try them, and if they don't work, then you say, okay, on to the next, right? It's not a failure of you as a human being. It's not a failure of your intelligence. I think most of us think that if we just think about this puzzle hard enough, we'll be able to fix everything. And that's not necessarily the case. So how can you see an experiment as an opportunity to try something without taking it so personally if it doesn't go the way you planned?
Right.
So that's what we hope for.
Just having some curiosity around it.
Exactly. Yeah, we talked about compassionate curiosity.
Right. I love that.
And seeing what works and then being willing to go with it or not, depending on the result.
So in the families that you've worked with, can you think of any examples, sort of some tangible ideas for our listeners on what kind of experiments to try?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the range was really broad. A common theme was, doing fun stuff together, setting aside to do fun things. So families do game nights or bike rides or movie nights. And the idea is that those don't just enhance the family life, right? They may have spillover into the community if you invite friends over, or they might spill over into your work if you, feel like you're less guilty when you actually work because you had quality time with your kids. Families try things like having a family Sunday night meeting where they coordinate all the logistics for the week and do that with less anxiety and stress and poor communication during the week when you're trying to figure out who goes when and where. My family is experimenting with a whiteboard right now that lists everybody's Zoom meetings. Use that as a way to keep track of everything because you're getting overwhelmed. Families spend a lot of time trying to build their health together. So lots of, as you said, bike rides and walks in nature as experiments. But the other thing is that the experiment doesn't necessarily have to involve all of the family members. So one person might change something about their work or, volunteering in the community for one person or for everyone. So there's all these different ways to make changes in your life that have positive ripple effects across the different parts. And in the book, we outlined 6 different types of experiments that were popular among, they each were customized and individualized to work for those specific families.
Yeah, that's a good point because I find it's hard. So there's 5 of us in the family, and finding something to do that all 5 people, are excited about is pretty much impossible. So I can tell you, we were having that exact problem. And every night was a debate about what activity we were going to do. So we ended up experimenting, and we still do this. We have a little bag with 4 different poker chips in it, and we pull out, every time we have about an hour of free time as a family, we pull out a chip, and it means it's someone's turn, and they get to pick. And everybody else does it, and they have to do it with a pretty good attitude. And it means that sometimes you do things that aren't your cup of tea, but it also means that that about once a week, everybody's going to do what you want to do that day. So that's our experiment, because we couldn't come up with one activity that worked for everybody. Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And so, I love the community aspect of the book that you talk quite a bit about. Yeah, I've always heard, and I've been in this parenting world for the past 16 years, and I hear it all the time about how it takes a village to raise a child. And I agree, and I love the concept. But for a lot of us, that's really hard to make happen because for many people, I don't even live anywhere near my family. I might have friends that don't have kids anywhere near the same age as my kids. And so give us a couple of tips on how do we tap in or into that bucket of community. Give us a few suggestions on how we might start that.
Yeah, so I think going back to sort of why get involved in community, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And what your values are. Is it people to have fun with? Is it people to share a sense of purpose with? Is it, childcare with? So if you go back to why you want the community, it may point you in the direction of the type of community that you should connect with, right? So there's not necessarily one size fits all good way to be in community. Right now we might be thinking about, how do I connect with the people who are physically, on my block, so that we have a sense of camaraderie and like we're supporting one another, we're supporting our elderly neighbors. So that might meet a specific need or specific value that we have right now. I personally just did a Google search for ways to volunteer virtually because I'm missing that sense of connection and community. And, what I wanted was to feel like I was helping people. So, I found the need initiated the search. I'm starting to think about this summer, and with the assumption that summer camps might be a community of, a couple different friends with kids, where we might, if it's safe to do so, have our kids get together for a small group summer camp. So, my mind and everyone's mind should kind of be on the lookout for what are the values and the needs that need fulfilling, and then try to build the relationships in that way, and not to see that necessarily as a selfish thing, right? I think people think, oh, if I go out and look, just try to find people who will give me what I need, that feels selfish. But it's really about building networks of love and trust and support that create fulfillment for yourself and for them as well.
Good. That's great advice. So as we wrap up here today, we are in a unique time in history, and I think it's probably one of the toughest times for parents right now, with all the added challenges, and we've got to now be homeschoolers and run businesses from home and spend much more time in your house with your family than you probably ever have before. So can you share with us maybe one or two of your sort of top tips for parents who are going through this time and just keeping their head above water?
Yeah, I think my number one tip that I try to remember and apply to myself as much as I can is to be gentle on yourself, right? It's going to be virtually impossible to deliver your best self constantly to all the people who want your time and attention right now. So, the idea that we could maintain our work performance and homeschool our kids and take care of ourselves in the way that we're used to, it just may not be possible. So to give yourself a little room to be imperfect and to show some compassion towards yourself is my first tip. And then my second one is just to be willing to try new ways of doing things and seeing what sticks, seeing what works. So, for instance, this week we relocated all of our desks to the same room. Now, on the one hand, that seems like a terrible idea because we're just moving ourselves closer to each other, but we all moved to the room with the Ethernet connection so that we're not relying on the Wi-Fi. And it means that everybody can have a smoother technological experience when they're on Zoom calls or on their iPads. And that relieves a ton of stress. So we may move the desks back, but it's worth trying for a week or two to see how it goes, and then we'll reflect. So just be willing to, as we call it, experiment, but they can be really small. They don't have to be massive upheavals. It might be moving a desk or trying out a whiteboard or having your kids make dinner once a week, right? Whatever it is, try it, see if it works, and then if it doesn't, that's okay.
That's great. Yeah. We've been doing just little things, again, things we've never even really thought of before. But like all of my kids have watched the TV series called The Office. And so we this week we said, okay, everyone gets to pick their favorite episode, and we'll all sit down together and watch, whose ever turn it is, watch your favorite episode. So just like little things,
I love that.
right? Just
yeah, little things, right?
Little creative things that kind of keep it, fresh and a little bit fun, and just keep us all sane somehow.
Yeah, well, yesterday we had an apple tasting contest. Like when we did our, weekly grocery run, well, I did it by myself. I got one of every kind of apple that they had in the store, and we cut them all up and did a blind taste test.
Oh, I love that idea.
There was no, specific purpose other than to come together and do something kind of fun. And, we had a great time, and we figured out what our mutually favorite apple is. So we got something out of it as well.
And everyone agreed on the same apple?
Well, my son went for a green apple, but other than that, we really, there's the Honeycrisp is a big winner.
Oh, good to know. I'm not familiar with the Honeycrisp. I'll have to give it a try.
It's a good one.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, anybody who's listening, go out and get your hands on a copy of Parents Who Lead. It's well worth the read. I want to thank you for being here today, and I wish you well, both with the book and getting through the next few weeks.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening today. As always, please sleep well.